Vampires are creatures of the night that are immortal beings, who feast on the blood of the living. Vampire myths have haunted humanity for centuries, with origins tracing back to ancient civilizations that feared dark spirits and creatures of the night. These myths are rooted in the belief that the dead could return, not as mere ghosts, but as monstrous beings that fed on the living. The earliest references to bloodthirsty creatures can be found in the ancient texts of Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Greece, where they were seen as demonic forces that rose from the grave to cause death and destruction. But it wasn't until Eastern Europe, in places like Romania and Hungary, that the vampire legend truly began to take shape. The word vampire itself comes from the Slavic term vampir, which referred to a creature or spirit that sucked the blood of the living. These early vampires were not the suave, sophisticated creatures we know today. They were decayed corpses, risen from their graves, bringing disease and terror to their communities. People believed that when someone died under mysterious or violent circumstances, they were often returned from the dead as a vampire, their thirst for blood unquenchable. In these superstitious times, villagers took extreme measures to protect themselves. If a loved one died, and a strange illness or death began to spread in the village, it was not uncommon for the deceased to be exhumed and examined for signs of vampirism. If fresh blood was found around the mouth, or if the body appeared unusually preserved, it was a sure sign that something unnatural had occurred. The villagers would then stake the body through the heart, decapitate it, or even burn it to ensure that it could never rise again. One of the most chilling stories from history is that of Vlad Dracula, also known as Vlad the Impaler. A 15th century ruler of Wallachia, Vlad's cruelty earned him a fearsome reputation across Europe. Though he was not a vampire in the literal sense, his brutal methods of execution, impaling his enemies on long wooden stakes, made him a symbol of terror. His name, Dracula, meaning son of the dragon, would go down in history, and over time, his image became tied to the vampire legend, forever cemented in folklore. The fear of the undead was so pervasive that, during times of plague or famine, whole villages would be thrown into a frenzy of suspicion and paranoia. It was not uncommon for bodies to be buried with garlic, iron nails, or other protective charms. These precautions were meant to prevent the dead from rising and continuing their reign of terror. It wasn't just the rich or powerful who were feared, it was anyone who seemed to die in mysterious circumstances. Throughout the centuries, the vampire myth continued to evolve, but it always retained its core elements. An immortal creature that lived by feeding on the living, vampires tapped into humanity's deepest fears, the fear of death, and the uncertainty of what comes after. People feared not only the physical death but also the possibility of being trapped in a twisted, unending existence. As the centuries passed, these stories of the undead spread further, growing darker and more elaborate. The vampire became a symbol not just of death, but of the eternal struggle against it. While the myth would transform through literature and art, the core fear and fascination with the vampire would never fade. Even in the modern era, the tales of the undead continue to captivate our imaginations, holding a mirror to our greatest fears and desires. The vampire, an immortal creature that defies death, remains an enduring symbol of humanity's struggle with the unknown. And though we may no longer fear the vampire in the same way, the legend still lurks in the shadows, a reminder of the terror that once gripped our ancestors. The darkness of the vampire myth endures, and with it, our fascination with the creatures of the night.